Y el auge de los eSports. Alberto Guerra, Guerra IP, Brasil. Ricardo Galicia, Asociación de Abogados del Deporte de la Ciudad de México, ASAD México. Christopher Chase, Frankfurt, Kurnit, Klein, Estados Unidos. Moderadora, Wallis Pons, AngelesPons, República Dominicana.
Hola, antes de comenzar, quisiera agradecer a
this panel titled The New Environment of Sport Industry and the Rise of Esport, the Pandemic Impacts Sports, and mostly to our panelists that are here with me, and in particular to Juan Sebastián Cantillo, who is joining us as substituting Ricardo Garcia, and he's coming as a MVP player in this digital sport event that we're having here today. We're going to talk about how sports have been affected and how it has needed to adapt and innovate during this current situation we're living, known as the COVID-19, without the live interactions of the fans, empty stadiums, and the role esport has played during these days. I will introduce you our panelists today, which are Christopher Chase. He's a partner with Frankfurt Kurnit, located in New York, where he's an intellectual property and transactional attorney for the advertising and entertainment industry, with a focus on sport, music, and event production. He leads the firm's sport industry practice, where he represents governing bodies, leagues, teams, athletes, and sports and sponsors in a wide range of matter, including a sponsorship, endorsement, event, and media deals. Over the past 5 years, he has helped negotiate $1 billion in sponsorship, endorsement, and media agreement. He's also an adjunct professor of Fordham University School of Law, where he teaches on class on intellectual property licensing. Also joining us today is Alberto Guerra, partner with Guerra IP, located in Brazil. He's very well-known IP attorney, not only in the IP sector, but also in the sport industry. He has played different roles in the Gremio Football Porto Alegre Football Club, always providing interop service and intellectual property matter. He has been the legal director. He has played many different roles in this institution. He has been the legal director, the member of the decision-making body, and also vice president of the board of directors. He has been football president, vice president, and director. In the tennis and other sport clubs, he has been in the decision-making body. He has been part of the decision-making body, and he has been the secretary, vice president, and he is actually a single president candidate for the 2021 presidency. Also with us today is Juan Sebastián Cantillo, who is specialized in business administration, but he has a major in sport industry, and he has been very well known in the in the developing of video games. He is currently he managed the Huawei App Gallery mobile gaming business growth for Colombia and Ecuador, ensuring healthy growth in the ecosystem of this system. Well, let's start our panel. So let's talk about the sport industry and this new environment we are living. So let's start with some questions that we're going to raise today, and the panelists will be answering all the questions that we have related to this current situation. So can you share from your different perspective the way sport industry has adapted and innovate?
Hi, Wallis. Hi, Christopher. Hi, Juan. First of all, I would like to thank you for this invitation for AZIP. Also to thank you, my partners in this panel. I'm very proud and really, very proud to be here in this interesting meeting. And I hope everybody likes our small talk here, our conversation. We'll try to make it informal. And if somebody have questions after all, please let us know. So when AZIP invited me to this panel, they considered my role in two different sports clubs. One of them, Grêmio, as you already told, Wallis, and also in Asociação Leopoldina Juvenil, which is a social club, but also very famous in tennis here in Brazil. So the impact of the pandemic was different in these two different clubs, but I dare say that, the changes and the innovation was quite the same for both. But before entering in your question, it's important to make to point out some important information. Like 99, if you have 100% of all money invested by the sponsors in sports, 99% goes to soccer in Brazil, and 1% is shared by all other sports. And I'm talking about volleyball, which Brazil it's very famous and good one, beach volley, and tennis, futsal, basketball, judo, athletics. So many of these sports that Brazil in the past won gold medals. They share 1% of all sponsor money in sports in Brazil. So being said that, you can imagine how different it is when we talk about Grêmio, which is one of the largest soccer club in Brazil, and we talk about a tennis club. The sector of events were very affected, and the sports industry deal with events. So it's, of course, the impact was very big. Most industries could reopen partially, but social events almost not. Just a very small ones, respecting the distance of 2 meters and use the safe equipments. So the decision of stop championships and tournament was the piece that made all the domino fall down. I'm not taking position of these decisions, if it was right or wrong, but I can tell you that in this week here in South Brazil, it's the first time all the regions are in red flag. So we are in today here in South Brazil is much worse than in last April, when the pandemic begins. So when the championships and the tournaments were suspended, there is no broadcast, there is no games to be watched on TV, there is no transmission, and with no transmission, there is no transmission fees for the club. And this is the most important revenue of a soccer team, soccer club here in Brazil. Just to tell you some numbers, Grêmio signed the transmission amount that Grêmio signed and received is about 1 billion reais, which is more or less $200 million today, for 6 years of transmission. And we're talking about open TV, subscription channels, streaming, and pay-per-view. If there is no transmission, so there is the sponsors also they suspended their payments because they said that their mark was not exposed as they want on T-shirts or even inside the stadium. So they suspend the payments, even if it was not included this provision in the license agreement. But we understand the situation, that those companies, those sponsors also, they were in a very bad position, but it was, again, another loss of revenue. Also, and it was good, Wallis, you put here the stadium of Grêmio. Grêmio built this, it's a very modern stadium. We are very proud of this stadium. It's like European American stadium here in South Brazil. And of course, the club could not afford that, could pay for it at once with their own money. So we make an agreement with a very important company at that time here in Brazil, with some incentive for the World Cup. And they built this stadium for Grêmio, exchanging for 20 years, exploring the stadium, and also receiving the money that the members of Grêmio pay. So the membership fees that Grêmio received from 90,000 members that pay monthly goes to this company who built the stadium. And with the pandemic, Grêmio remained paying this company who managed the stadium. Since this company, they lost also revenues from each game, and also some concerts they do in this stadium. Another important loss for that was also the licenses. There are many products. I think it's the fourth or third main important revenue from Grêmio. And the licenses stopped, suspended also payment. So Grêmio didn't receive even the minimum fee that it was provided in our license agreement for all kinds of products, also from the soccer schools and also from the Grêmio store that sell all those products. And finally, in this domino fall down, it was the players. I think there is a future question about that, but also it's very important to say that because we are talking about stars, and the payroll of the players in Grêmio annually, it's a kind of $30 million. It's a lot of money, and when all those payments suspended, there is no way to pay those players, those stars. And a renegotiation was tried for them. I will talk it later, but not in the way people think. At the final, I can say that the most affected in all this pandemic, of course, it was the club, not the players, not the company that managed the stadium. Of course, they have some losses, but the club was far away the most affected in this pandemic situation. So to answer your question about adaptation, what they could do, what most of companies did in all sectors, it was to go to the cash flow and try to stop all the payments. So just to give you an idea, all the service providers from Grêmio, they cut off 40% of their payments, not only for the pandemic, but from now on. So it was, I think that, and that was that I think it's the same for a tennis club that's much very, very, very small, or for Grêmio, or for our company. The pandemic situation, it was an opportunity to check how it was operated, to see also the structure of the club, if we really need all that structure to maintain the team. So the innovation happens also in all sectors. I mean, in healthcare, legal provisional in contrast. So in the legal departments also, there is a lot of change due to this situation, with sponsor, with service providers, or also with the new players that Grêmio will hire in the future. So trying to put in the contract, something that we can do in case something like that happen again, and we hope it will never happen again. I think that, and just to end this your question, Wallis, it's not because of the pandemic, but I think the pandemic has accelerated a lot of online things. So Grêmio had a project for Grêmio Play, where it's kind of Netflix or Disney Plus, but from Grêmio, where you can see a lot of interviews, past games. So this accelerate a lot of online things to put, the players in contact with our fans, also to expose, to show the brand of our sponsors, and also it's a new source of revenue for the club.
Thank you. Thank you, Alberto. Christopher, can you please let us know how the industry has adapted and innovate?
Sure. I mean, I would certainly echo Alberto in a broader concept in the United States. And thank you very much again, Wallis, for having me here. And thank you, CP, for inviting me. I hope next year you'll invite me again and we can be in person and I can see a beautiful South American country instead of sitting here in my home office. So we'll looking forward to 2021. And I think, everything that Alberto said is very true in the United States as well. And I would say that the two words of 2020 for the sports industry have to be adaptation and innovation. So you're looking at the major sports leagues, how do they adapt for the rest of the year, and what do they do going forward into the next season? So when the pandemic hit, it was early March, so we were in the middle of an NBA season, an NHL season. The NFL already ended with their Super Bowl, so that was done. But some of these other big leagues were right in the middle of their seasons, and what do they have to do? So there was a shutdown for a while, obviously, and they had to learn how to adapt. How to produce the games, how to operate their leagues and their businesses. And that was a really difficult thing, particularly for bigger organizations that are more traditional in nature, and people expect certain things. They had to completely revamp how they operate, their business essentially. For smaller leagues and for sort of up and coming startups, they have a little more ability to adapt to the new normal and to do some things going forward, because they don't have that history necessarily. They don't have that structure in place. So maybe in this type of year, it's good for them as opposed to the traditional leagues who have a lot of different things to satisfy. As Alberto mentioned, it's not just the teams and the leagues, but also the sponsors and the advertisers. They have to adapt as well, because now we're looking at a different marketing scheme. You can't simply run television advertising. or have billboards in the stadiums because no one's in the stadiums. So you have to figure out ways to reach those fans. So even on that aspect, of the industry, the sponsors and the advertisers, they had to adapt as well. And then of course the media, the different television broadcasters and digital broadcasters, what do they do with respect to the games that they're no longer able to broadcast, during that period? So it was certainly a transition for them as well. Then you also see the innovation, with the NBA, for example, when they went to a bubble format for their tournaments where they essentially quarantined, almost all the teams in the league at the Disney World Resort in Orlando, and they put together a fantastic tournament. The basketball was actually really incredible, but they were able to work with their broadcasters to produce all the games. They were able to work with the players, the players union and the league kind of negotiate as to how to set this up, and they did a really good job of doing that. And then you can see some of the innovation there. They couldn't have fans in the stands. They took big video screens, and they had the fans appearing on video screen. And that was, via one of their sponsors, Microsoft, who put it together, and then Michelob Light, the beer company that was sponsoring it. So you could be a virtual fan at one of the games. So there's certainly innovation on that aspect as well. One of the images you see up on the screen with respect to the empty stadiums, the teams had to adapt as to how to satisfy their sponsors. And you can see they put these big tarps over the seating arrangement, and you'll have the sponsors' names there. And certainly we saw that in Europe when the leagues started back up there, particularly with the different football leagues, and that's also come to America at the same time. And then, speaking of innovation, the smaller entities and the startup leagues were able to pivot, I think, much faster. The first sport that was back in the United States was the National Women's Soccer League, the NWSL, and they were able to put together this, I'm looking on the screen, this Challenge Cup where 8 of the 9 teams were able to come again sort of in this bubble arrangement where they were all quarantined together, and they were able to do a tournament. One team actually had a number of COVID cases before they left and weren't able to participate. But otherwise, once they got there were no instances of COVID, and they were able to successfully finish their tournament. They were able to negotiate title sponsorships with Procter & Gamble and their Secret brand, which is a very big deal. They also negotiated a large media arrangement with CBS, who put both the intro game and then the championship game on the national television broadcast, as well as the rest of the games on their digital platform. So, being able to, as a sort of a smaller startup league in the United States, they were able to put this together and sort of become the first one that was back, and it was very successful for them. And there have been others as well. The Premier Lacrosse League, which is another startup league and a popular sport in America, probably not necessarily in Latin America yet, but they were able to put together their own bubble tournament where a bunch of teams came together and they had their own sponsors, and it was really successful as well. And then a little bit, I guess, to call on my own clients, I started working with an entity called Ring City USA, which is a new boxing league. And they have been putting on, talk about the worst time to start a new sports league. They did it in 2020. We were negotiating agreements all along, and then of course we have to figure out how to operate this. So instead of having boxing matches in a nice arena or a theater or some other type of forum, they're doing it in the parking lot behind the Wild Card Gym in Los Angeles. And you see this up on the screen here, that they're using the buildings in the background to put their images up. You can see the boom cameras. The 2 announcers are standing there on a platform with a plexiglass screen in between. So this is a good example of adapting to the situation and then innovating at the same time. So we're producing live boxing on TV, and we signed deals with NBC Sports and with Twitch for streaming services as well. And it's been very successful so far. And we've had American fighters, Mexican fighters, and Eastern European fighters. So it's a nice platform on both not only American basis but a global basis. And they've done a really good job of putting this together. So yes, of course, we'd much rather be in the stadiums and in the arenas and in the theaters so that everyone can be there and see these things live. But you have to figure out how to operate in 2020. And I guess the final aspect of this is the fan. It's really disappointing for fans because you can't be at any of these places. And you're watching everything on TV, and it's not as exciting, I would imagine, than actually being there. And as Alberto mentioned, certainly losing that ticket revenue is a real hit to teams in particular who rely on all of that. And so any league or team or tournament that has entry fees, they're losing out. So that's been a big difference. But hopefully going forward, we'll have a better way to go in 2021.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Christopher. Let's go to the other question, but I need to say that yes, we need to go back to that crowded places, the music, the food, and the fanatic living the sports every day. And the second question that I would like to raise here is from the legal perspective, what lesson have we learned related to all types of agreement entered in the sport industry? And one in particular interest that we have is related to the force majeure clause. How the same will look like? Will this solve ongoing COVID or related issues emerging from this situation?
Yeah, it's certainly been the big issue of the year in terms of agreements and how they play out. I thought 2020 was going to be the year of ambush marketing, because you have an Olympics, you had Euro 2020 and all these big events, and that was going to be the buzzword, but instead it's become force majeure, and seeing what happens with these agreements. And I spent most of March, April, and May trying to figure out if my clients could get out of deals or could enforce deals. So I've never looked at force majeure clauses so carefully in my life, and it's been a really interesting way of doing it. And as lawyers, we're here to guide the clients to expect the unexpected. And we're always looking through agreements to make sure that we're covered, that there's flexibility involved, that there are ways to get out or to enforce, depending on what side you're representing. And the force majeure clause is, it's always one of those things that's in there, and it's in the agreement, and maybe it's towards the end of the contract, but it's become so important. And I think, looking at the force majeure clauses now and then what you're doing going forward, are two completely separate things. So in the United States, force majeure is a creature of the contract. And by that, I mean, it's not, by statute or by law. It's really only depends on whether the two entities put it in the agreement itself. And then the courts will only enforce it to the letter of the agreement. What does it specifically state? So one of the biggest issues with the whole pandemic is whether a pandemic is actually incorporated into the definition of force majeure. Typically, you're looking at things like hurricanes and tornadoes and earthquakes and labor strikes and things along those lines. I'm not even sure if my own stock clause, when I put in the force majeure clause, if I include pandemic. Now certainly I'm going to do it going forward, but it was never something you normally contemplate. So the first thing that a court would look at, and by the way, it's these are 50 different laws, because each state will take a different view of this. So what New York says may be different than what California says. But for the most part, force majeure clauses are strictly construed. And I think, the media likes to throw the words around force majeure without really understanding what it means. And frankly, it's not a termination right. What it really means is it's an excuse to breach. If you're not being able to provide any rights or benefits, if you have a force majeure clause that says that there's an outside force, essentially, that is made it impossible for you to perform your obligations, then you're no longer in breach. And that's what the courts are going to look at. Was the pandemic covered? And therefore, you're allowed to get out of your potential breach. So that's been the first issue. It's very narrowly construed, and you have to look at whether pandemic is covered or not. And then the second thing is, sort of what's the remedy? What did the parties contemplate? Did they incorporate a remedy? Is it a make good? Are we going to give back some type of sponsorship benefit? Is it a refund? Is it lowering the fees? Or is it perhaps termination after a certain time? All of those things really have to be incorporated into the agreements themselves, and they're not necessarily always done that way. So a lot of what I've done this year is renegotiating sponsorship agreements where the force majeure clause wasn't so clear. One side wasn't able to provide the rights or benefits, and the other side, was looking to get either money back or some type of make good. So for the most part, we've been able to adapt to the situation and have come up with amendments to various sponsorship and media contracts to make sure that the parties are both getting somewhat of what they expected. There's a little pain on both sides, but that's sort of what has to happen. And I think going forward, and apologies for taking all the time, but I think going forward, what I've been advising my clients is, let's not try to shoehorn things and stick things into the force majeure clause. At this point, the pandemic doesn't fall under force majeure, and courts look at an element of unforeseeability. If something was foreseeable, then it shouldn't be force majeure. Clearly right now we're in the middle of a pandemic. You can't claim something is pandemic related. So what I've been telling clients is to be very specific as to what happens. If a government entity orders a quarantine or a shutdown the night of the event, we have the right to a refund, or the right to terminate, or the right to postpone, whatever it may be, coming up with some types of remedies. But be very specific about it. Let's not try to figure out if, is this the same thing as a hurricane, or is this the same thing as a strike? At this point, we should just be very clear as to what we're looking for. So sort of building in that flexibility, I think, is something we have to do going forward. And 2021 is going to be affected because there's so many, events that are happening, over the next 6 months or so that are unlikely to go back to what it was like. So we have to address it that way. And then, of course, going forward, making sure we put the words pandemic in our force majeure clauses, and otherwise covering things along those lines. I'll stop there.
Wallis, what Christopher said was very interesting, because now I'm jumping, I'm here representing institutions. Now I'm jumping the other side of the counter again and talking about as an IP lawyer. And what he said was very interesting, because independently what is said in those agreements, we are here to guide the clients for what are in the agreements, or if in this case, if there is no legal provision. And I think we are partners with our sponsors, with the players in case of, soccer, and with our funds. Yes, because also this was also very difficult for the club, because the pandemic affected everyone. So from 90,000 members that pay monthly, maybe 10-20% stop paying also, because there is no game to watch. There is no, they are sitting in the stadium they cannot use. So paying, why paying? But even though most of them, the majority is still paying, because the club exists because of them. We are a civil association. So what we learn about this, of course, that many new articles, new clauses will be from now on put in those agreements. But besides that, we need to make an arrangement that is good for everybody, for all parties. What is not possible is just one side stay strong, causing the damage for the other side. So in case of Grêmio, for example, to adjust the accounts, we had to sold our star. So I think there is a picture of him, Everton. It was before the pandemic. It was a very hot market for soccer. And Grêmio was asking for him about 60 million euros for Everton, this one. He was elected the best Brazilian. He was playing also in the national team and was elected the best player in a Copa America. So the market was very hot for him. And we were asking about 60 million euros to sell him. And the proposal was around 40 million euros, and Grêmio said no. And then during the pandemic, we had to sell Everton to Benfica for 20 million euros, just to adjust the accounts. So at the end, we can say who paid the bill of this pandemic situation.
Thank you, Christopher and Alberto. I think we used not to look at force majeure clauses, but for now, for the future, I think we're going to pay quite of attention to this type of clauses. So moving forward, I would like to ask you about how a sponsorship, new categories emerge, have new categories emerge in the sponsorship. I don't know if Juan Sebastian, if you want to.
At least for us here in tennis or in soccer, no new categories. Although we know that many different industries are making a lot of money with the pandemic situation. But until today, as far as I know, there is no new category of sponsors, although I can see many opportunities, and that's what I like America, because they really know how to take these opportunities and transform and change for a good economic situation.
Hi everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So regarding this kind of sponsorships, I think it's not like getting new sponsorship categories. Is that existing brands, for example, they are willing to get some new alternatives when it comes to activation or even content creation. If we understand or if we see the sports venues or sports clubs as a content creator hub, so I think I have seen a lot of new agreements, not in terms of agreements, but activations as well. I mean, everyone is going up to the online perspective, and it has been pretty interesting to see. For example, I mean, if we take La Liga, for example, or Premier League, we see they just had to invent or create or this kind of new assets to sell sponsors, because what has been happening here, maybe in Latin America, for example, is that we have seen a lot of, or myself, I have seen a lot of sponsors that want to cut the clause or say, I want to pay here until this date because, I mean, this was the last match we played. And maybe we can go further and try to see if all these kind of things regarding activation and sponsorship have discovered new ways of content creation and brand association when it comes to, for example, esports for football teams or players with esports teams, all these kind of things. Then maybe we could talk further, but I think I have seen a lot of like different activations, which is pretty good, and is the step that maybe the sponsors and the sports organizations had to take. I think it was the natural thing to do.
Christopher?
Yeah, and I certainly, echo those comments on both ends. There are definitely, new sponsorship categories or things that, may have always been there, but were never really the focus, and now they are. So the example on the screen is from a Clorox commercial where they are now a sponsor of the NBA. With going back to the bubble tournaments, and the commercial shows different people cleaning the arena with Clorox wipes. So there are certainly sort of new and innovative things where people never really thought about cleaning supplies as a big sponsor, but obviously this is a different year and that makes a little more sense. The other example on the screen is a NASCAR sponsorship from DoorDash, and DoorDash is a food delivery company. It's a technology platform that really focuses on food delivery, and there are several in the category, Uber Eats and Postmates, that have really taken off this year because obviously we're all quarantining at home, so getting delivered food has become a big deal. And this is a new way for these types of companies to market themselves. And as Juan Sebastian said, this is an opportunity for some more innovation in terms of coming up with new marketing schemes and maybe things you didn't think about before, now you can. It's a license to become more innovative because you're not going to reach the traditional fan in a traditional way. So whether it is via new sponsorship types of categories, whether it's with new marketing, with new activations, everyone has to think about those things. And particularly in the esports area as well, now that people are at home playing a lot more video games, how do we target those consumers? So activating more on digital platforms has certainly become a big thing this year, and will certainly increase in the future as well.
Thank you, Alberto, Juan Sebastián, and Christopher for the answers. And going back to probably, well, the first that wants to answer the question is, I've seen a lot of sport entertainment recently, a lot of documentaries and studies made about sports entertainment. Does this have anything to do with the current situation that we're feeling, spots?
Yes, I think it has been fueled by the current situation. I think it's pretty natural, but as I was mentioning before, I think the sports organization has realized the potential that they have when it comes to being a content creating hub. I mean, you know that, for example, I mean, if you see some kind of Instagram for any professional sports club or athlete, they're just monetizing the things because nowadays I mean, when it comes to marketing, it's not only about like conversion and getting some KPIs that maybe, for example, you should sign on an agreement or all these kind of things when it comes to a sponsorship agreement. But I mean, you have to innovate, and I think this is the pretty good thing that we have been seeing. Like, for example, brands are being reactivated in a pretty good way. For example, Michael Jordan with The Last Dance documentary, which is pretty good. I don't know, Jose Mourinho, for example, and I mean, all this kind of content that has been pretty good. And for example, FIFA, the video game, which is a sports video game. Right now, I think they just included some artists, for example, Dua Lipa, which is a singer. I think this is quite pretty interesting how the brands, being sports organizations, have realized that they have more influence around their society or the community, and made a lot of cross content with other platforms or disciplines such as video games, music, movies, all these kind of things. So it has been pretty interesting. We have been seeing across the whole 2020, and I hope this becomes a pretty strong revenue source for the sports organizations. Maybe we need it, especially in Latin America.
Yeah, and I agree with that as well. I mean, the lack of live sports programming, really opened up the opportunity to have more sports entertainment. And The Last Dance is a perfect example. That was not supposed to be distributed till later this year, but ESPN and Netflix pulled it back much earlier because all of us were sitting at home with nothing to watch, and it was a massive hit. So it shows the value of that content, and the ability to distribute it on sort of a quicker turnaround really helps out. And half of my firm does entertainment work, so working with producers and directors and distributors and financiers, and they've been really busy this year. Not only in traditional entertainment work, but also in sports. Because we're looking at more of these documentaries, more of these branded platforms, and podcasts have also taken off. And these are areas where not only do the teams, the leagues have some ability to sort of develop their content, but also the athletes themselves. Athletes have really been doing a number of podcasts, have been doing another number of sort of behind the scenes documentary type of things. And that's been able to take off, because now you can produce things and put it on your own YouTube channel or put it on Twitch, where you don't have to have a deal with ESPN or CBS or NBC. This is something that you can just go ahead and do. So we've definitely seen a bigger impact in 2020 on, both the entertainment industry merging with the sports industry in terms of having more sports type documentaries. And you also mentioned Jose Mourinho. The Tottenham All or Nothing was fantastic, and so Amazon has done a really good job with their different All or Nothing series. This year the Tottenham one was great because it showed what happened during the pandemic, even because they had the shutdown during the beginning of the season. So that was quite an interesting documentary to watch. And then, as Juan Sebastian mentioned, it is important for the teams and the leagues to view themselves as a brand as well, and to develop this content. Having additional content is a fantastic way to reach out and touch your fans and touch consumers, and to give things to your sponsors to sponsor. Otherwise, they would have nothing to do if there was no live programming. I'll tell you that the FIFA at Home program really got me through March and April, because they were showing old matches on YouTube, and that was fantastic. I was able to watch Belgium, Japan again, and Mexico, Germany. It was fantastic matches. And there was no live soccer to watch, so that's what I had. And because FIFA had all this content and they could create their own YouTube channel and put it out there, you know, that was something that was really interesting to me as a fan with nothing else to watch. So if teams, and you know, we talk about the legal aspect of it, you know, negotiating sort of holdbacks and to get those rights, you know, to get the behind the scenes rights, to get the locker room rights, to get the documentary type of things, you know, it's tough to negotiate with big broadcasters and distributors because they want all-encompassing rights deals. But the more that a team or an athlete may be able to do in order to sort of recapture their own content and hold themselves, you know, we've seen now that this is very valuable and certainly can be used going forward.
Thank you. And Alberto, I do have one question for you particularly. I know that sports tends to sponsor athletes and of course younger ones. Has this current situation affected scholarships granted for athletes?
Yes, it affects a lot. For example, in the tennis club, which we work with kids until they become like 16, 17. You know, the best players in the world with 17, 18, they are already playing the ATP tour. But and we host in our club one very important youth tournament here in Porto Alegre in Juvenil. But we are very proud also because, of course, that many of those kids, they don't become a professional tennis, but they can live and they can have a better life with playing tennis. For example, I have 10 members of our club that they have a very good tennis and they are playing for the university in US, and the university invited them to play in the name of university, paying all the scholarship for them. So this is with the pandemic. It was not possible during this year. There is no competition, no tournament to make the points or to achieve this goal, which is to go to a US university with all fees paid by the university, for example. Also, it's important to mention is when I was out of the Grêmio 25 years ago, we always think about, you know, the scholarship when we have the kids playing soccer and try to make them to become stars and to play in the professional team. But when we are there, for example, right now we have more or less about 1,000 kids from 8 years old until 18. And we know that only 10 of them, maybe 15 of them will become really professionals. And what about the 985 other kids? What are they gonna do? So we have another view of them also and try to make them citizen and make them have other professionals or sports to get more, you know, the comprehensive of life, to be sharp on their commitments and become a real citizen. And all this kind of project, all this kind of, you know, to raise those kids as we were doing right now, and we have schools inside our structure, and they were feed there also. They have the breakfast, lunch, and dinner inside. They have activities. It was affected by the pandemic, so it was also a sector that we don't see very much, but a huge number of people and families were touched because of that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
And
Yes,
even here as well, and we don't necessarily have the same type of club-based scholarship programs in the United States, but college sports are so big here. And whenever I talk to people in Europe, for example, and I'm trying to explain the passion you see for Premier League teams, the best way to equate that in the United States is with college sports, because people are just so obsessed with it. It doesn't matter where you live in the country, whatever your school sport is, you always identify with those those people and players and teams, and it's been a fantastic thing. But it's been really tough this year because tournaments have been canceled. The college basketball tournament, March Madness, was canceled. It was literally in the middle of the tournament last March, and they had to cancel it. And that's one of the biggest things in the year in the sports calendar. So players that were maybe in their final year, their senior year of college, were not able to play in that tournament, which would have been the the culmination of their career of college basketball. And then it's trickled down because the two biggest sports in the United States college ranks are basketball and football, and because games have been postponed, you can't have fans in the stadium, sponsorship is down, there's a lot less money going around. And so the smaller sports are being affected as well. You see a lot of colleges cutting scholarships for tennis players and gymnasts and crew. It's been sort of unfortunately like a bloodbath across the board, where all of these athletes, I feel really bad for the student athletes, are not able to maintain their scholarships because their sportsmen discontinued. So that's been a really tough situation for them as well. It's a slightly different situation, I think, than what Alberto was discussing in terms of the younger children, but certainly for those of college and university age, it's been really difficult in 2020, and hopefully that gets better going forward too.
Yes, because the good ones will play. The ones who have natural skills, they will become professionals in their sports. But the real problem also with those who use sports to achieve other things in life. So families are touched, they are also affected. So this is the pandemic situation. We hope it ends quickly.
That's right.
That's right. Even students have been affected with this situation.
Yes.
They can go to the university for the cases in the United States, and for the younger ones have this scholarship. Well, they've been affected because the revenue comes from stadiums, from sales. So
yes, and it depends also, Wallis, how the club manage. For example, for the tennis club, we are also a social club there. So our saloons are very well known, maybe the most beautiful in city, to weddings, and we used to rent a lot of these saloons every weekend, and we make a lot of money with that. So we are not able to do that, but this money, it was important for us to invest in sports. So with no social events, we have no money to invest in sports as well. So that's the way this club functions. So we are also very affected. Maybe, of course, that it's another different number from Grêmio, who is a millionaire club here for the Brazilian standard. But for our standard in this tennis club, it was maybe much harder to this situation, because all our revenues really stopped from one day to the night. They really stopped because also members stopped paying the membership fees, because the club stayed more or less 100 days closed. The last time the club was closed, it was in 1945 due to the Second World War, for 3 or 4 days. And we stayed 100 days closed.
Nowadays, wow.
Yes, very tough.
Great impact. So we're now going to move to the esports events industry. So I want to bring on board Juan Sebastián once again and ask him to tell us how traditional sports are reaching fans through esports. Sebastián.
Okay, thanks. Well, I think it has been as I was mentioning before, and one of the alternatives that, or the options that sports organizations traditionally had to look. I think we all have been underestimating esports because I mean this is something that has been creating since the last decade, for example, or even before. I mean, but I think, for example, I mean, as a personal I don't know, thing that happened a couple of years ago, I was working with a technology company who's in charge of implementing all the infrastructure, technological things of the Olympics. And they told me, like, I mean, we were in a meeting with the committee, the IOC, and they told me, like, well, okay, what are we going to do with esports? And I was like, I mean, is it really that big right now? And it's like, yes, because, I mean, we are in a serious debate of how do we integrate these kind of things to our event, because I think even the IOC or the traditional sports did understood that I mean, their audience, their consumer, it's losing attention sometimes on some sports, and this is pretty real. This is the reason why maybe you have seen a lot of traditional sports organizations like jumping into the esports, because this is the way that they want to capture new audience. I mean, the younger ones, for example. I mean, the Gen Z, as more specifically. I do remember. I think it was in April. I did a FIFA tournament with all Colombian football clubs, and we broadcasted it on TV. And what the commercial director from the Colombian Soccer League told me was like, they have never got such an like big impact when it comes to digital in a short period of time. I mean, the tournament has been was on air like for 1 month and a half, and the comments were really like really good. I mean, it was generally positive, even though the Latin American fans, we are pretty passionate about football. And I mean, for my surprise, to be honest, I think people received it pretty well. So they want to do a lot of this kind of things. Even for example, I don't know if you have seen the athletes also doing these kind of things. People such as Casemiro, Gareth Bale, Dani Alves, all these kind of like athletes which own an esports team, and recently Garena Free Fire, which is one of the biggest games around Latin America, maybe Asia. They launched a partnership with Cristiano Ronaldo. So right now, Cristiano Ronaldo is a playable character within the game. So all these kind of things have been pretty much what the audience, what the audience was waiting for, and it had to be a must for traditional sports in order to not to catch new audiences and not staying with the same audience. We all the respect that they deserve, but it's more like that, and it has been quite pretty like interesting what we have seen across this year. When it comes to all the touch points or the interactions that an esports club or figure could have with a football club, such as streamers with streaming with players. For example, El Kun Agüero, this Argentinian football player, which started to make a broadcast on Twitch, and right now he did it so well, and it was so natural that the people loved him, and right now he has an own esports team. So this is what this is an evolution thing. I mean, this is pretty natural that we wanna do it.
Thank you. Christopher, do you have something to elaborate about content generated by this?
Yeah, it's been interesting, and much like Juan Sebastian said, the traditional teams and leagues have seen the ability then to cross over into esports, and it's somewhat of an easy transition. If you were a soccer team, then create a FIFA playing team, for the video game series. And same thing with the NBA. A lot of the teams created, NBA 2K esports teams to go along with their professional basketball team, because there is somewhat of an easy transition with respect to the audience, who already likes basketball, but now you're getting a different generation of consumer. So that's certainly been there. And, this year it's been interesting in terms of, again, without live programming, being able to use esports that people can do from home or, in other certain locations, and put that on TV. I mean, we saw that with the NASCAR auto racing league. They were able to create an iRacing league where they had real NASCAR drivers doing simulation races, and it was broadcast on Fox Sports. And actually did pretty well for the first couple of weekends when it happened. So you see this transition of, well, wait a second, what else can we come up with? And it actually worked in certain situations. So there is sort of a natural progression from, the physical sport of basketball or soccer or car racing and being able to push it into the video game version of it. And, it seems to work well. And then on the content creation side, Juan Sebastian's absolutely right. Now you have gamers, just on a broader perspective, as opposed to esports players, but gamers being able to create all their own content and have that following and gathering, and then athletes themselves who want to get involved. There's been a number of notable American sports stars that also want to be involved in esports as well, and really brought their following to that. So it's been an interesting way of looking at it. Esports it's an interesting thing in terms of, I'm not sure if anyone's figured out how to harness the power of it yet. It's still sort of a new industry in a way. And obviously, because the gaming has just really taken off in the past decade or so. But there are so many different players, in the market, and it's hard to know, who's going to really control this and who's going to bring it to the next level, because you're talking about essentially a piece of intellectual property that you don't have in the other sports. So you're looking at licensing things in terms of the game itself. If the four of us on the video right now wanted to create a football league, we could go rent a field and get some goals and some balls, and there we go. We can start a football league. If we wanted to create a Fortnite league, we would have to go to Epic Games and get a license for that. If we wanted to put it on various channels online, we'd have to agree to Twitch's terms or YouTube's terms. If we had financiers trying to finance us, we have to agree to those terms as well. So there's so many different players in the industry that, the rise of esports is certainly on the upward trend. I'm just not sure how we're going to get there yet. There's lots of challenges involved, and it's been pretty interesting across the board. So this year's been a good sort of test case of seeing how traditional sports can move into esports. And I think going forward with respect to esports themselves, once all the different players in the industry sort of focus on how they're going to put it together, I think we'll definitely see a bigger rise in it.
Thank you, Christopher. I would like to ask another question, because I see related to the esports industry and how these new events are coming up. We've seen that cable networks are filling airtime ones belong to traditional sports with sports programming related to esports event how this is working. What can you tell us about this?
Well, I mean, my personal opinion, it is pretty difficult maybe to to maintain it. Maybe creating content. I mean, there's something we have to understand pretty well, is that nowadays, for example, Twitch or Booyah or Nemo TV, all these streaming platforms, maybe Facebook Gaming, have been like natural to the gamer, right? So it's pretty difficult sometimes when a sports brand it tries to enter with esports content through television. I mean, if there is no reason behind maybe getting new audience that watch TV and wants to be interested in esports, then personal opinion, there wouldn't be any reason behind a ESPN, for example, Fox or these broadcasters to enter through the esports. What I'm trying to say now is that those brands have to enter to the channels that are already established. For example, maybe trying to get in a Twitch channel or all these kind of new broadcasting channels. But this is pretty difficult, because I mean, from the broadcaster side, I mean, I don't think they will like this option at all, because they want to get their content, not jumping the traditional monetization models that they have as a broadcaster. And this is something that we should understand, maybe these brands or these broadcasters to monetize through new or existing channels which are more natural to a gamer. So there has been that's an interesting point. I would love to, have these content pieces or content programs created by these broadcasters, but the broadcasting platform should be something pretty natural to gamers, because right now it's pretty much more difficult to make a platform which is non-natural to gamers and play your content there. So I think that's maybe the ideal world, but I do understand like the hurry that maybe some traditional broadcasters have on this point, which is getting new content or revenue sources.
Thank you, Juan Sebastian. And moving forward, I would like to bring another question. We see that sponsorship can open a valuable marketing channel for brands. Can you tell us how brands are reaching out consumers nowadays?
Okay, so I'll try to be pretty quick, because this is the pretty best value of esports from a marketing perspective. Basically, esports nowadays, they have an audience that traditional sports do not have. Or maybe it's much more difficult to reach these specific audiences with a traditional sports content. So what we should understand when it comes to marketing is that gamers specifically are pretty much more difficult to get within a message for a brand. For example, they will, like, if you don't, you as a brand do not do it correctly, they will repel you or reject you and see it as like cringe content, right? So this is some kind of like marketing pretty much insights, but what the brands want the most about this is brand, on the first early stages, is brand awareness, engagement, and then maybe on the second, third, fourth year, try to make some kind of conversions. I haven't seen a good sponsorship agreement in esports. Maybe Chris will have seen any successful case which on a first intention is a conversions for an audience to buy your product. So I think this is pretty good for the brands, and this is the real value of esports, like getting new channels to new audiences that maybe with your like your previous content you wouldn't have reached as well.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's certainly more brand awareness, I would say, at this point, because you're looking at a different audience in different channels, as opposed to traditional advertising with traditional sports. So it's not necessarily at the stage of the conversion. It's probably still just awareness, because perhaps a older or more traditional brand does not normally reach this particular audience. So I think that's definitely the benefit of it. We've had a few clients that have sponsored esports teams or leagues, and they're definitely, I guess, feeling out the whole industry and trying to see what's out there and how they can make it work. I'm not sure anyone's done it so super successfully. Some of the brands that have already been sort of in that space. You look at like a Red Bull, who's always been in the action sports area. They had a little bit more of an easy transition to an esports type of situation than some more traditional brands. Which is very helpful, obviously, to have that background. But I definitely agree with Juan Sebastian. It's more to do with brand awareness at this point, just getting in front of a new consumer or a different, trade channel or marketing channel than anything else.
Thank you, Juan Sebastian and Christopher. And has there been any challenges with developing esports tournament events and league? I know you mentioned something related to, but can you, Christopher, elaborate a little bit about the challenges faced in these developments of esports event?
Yeah, of course, it depends on, the underlying rights are all intellectual property. You have to have a publisher willing to develop a esports tournament for their particular game. We just can't go out and do it ourselves because there are underlying rights for it. And so that's a challenge to it, you know, unlike a traditional sport where you can create your own league. I mean, there have been so many, you know, American football leagues that have tried to come up and do their thing, and they can do that because they don't need permission from the NFL. They can just go out and create a league. You know, it's a little different with these sports because you indeed need permission from a particular game publisher because they have the underlying IP with respect to that game. So you know, it depends on if the publisher wants to create their own tournament or league. You know, then they have obviously the rights to do so, and then it's going to depend on whether they want to create a specific league. Where there are multiple teams involved, if they just want to create an one-off event, if they want to do a tournament, you know, several tournaments over the years. So there are different models and ways of doing it. And then a lot of it depends on where the money's coming from. You know, are there financiers willing to put money into a particular league or team, or to work with a developer or publisher to actually do something like that? And so I think that's where the challenge is. There's just so many different parties involved, and it all goes back to, you know, what the publisher or the game developer really wants to do at the end of the day, and that makes it more difficult than a traditional sport.
Thank you, Christopher. And well, we're almost ending, but before ending, I would like, before asking questions, I want to ask Alberto something that I think it is important to mention. It is about the players and their contracts. Can you, Alberto, tell us what's going on with this current situation?
Oh yes, during the pandemic, of course, that we also try to negotiate with players. But always when we talk about sports, there is something very different from other industries, which is the audience, which is the fans. So we are like, to be a director or work for a soccer club is very hard because, you know, your fans want you to win. The players also, and they are like stars, also pressure you to give all the best conditions to win. And in this situation, at least for Grêmio, because when we publish our balance sheet in the newspapers, because we are obliged to do that, and they know you are in a good financial situation, which is not common in Brazil. Let's begin for this mention. As a civil association here in Brazil, all the presidents, I mean, not all, but most of them want to get into the club. They are elected, want to win, and expend a lot of money to try to win, and then he leaves the club and let a big, you know, debt for the next president. It's very common in South America for the civil association, which I think we could stop in Grêmio from the last 10 years, from the past presidents, and really focus on make the team with the economic capacity we do have. So nowadays, from the last years, we've been winning some important tournaments, some important championships. We hire very good players, and for this year we are still in 3 big competitions. In the semi-final of the Brazilian Cup, we are in 4th in the Brazilian Championship, and also between the 8 in our South American Championship, which is the Libertadores. So when you sit to negotiate with stars and say to them, oh, look, we will pay you less than we have agreed, it's very difficult, because they use in their favor, the stars, you know, the fans, and say, okay, if you do that, maybe I go play another place, so I don't. So it's very hard also to, in this situation, to negotiate, although the sponsors, although the TV, although the licenses, they suspend payments. We need to renegotiate and give more than we established in the beginning. And at least for Grêmio, the salaries of the players is still the same, which represents 70% of their revenue. Part of their revenues are paid in image license agreement. So we use their image for products or for everything. So we negotiate with them 3 months of these agreements, image license agreements fees to be paid along in 2021. So there is no reduction. It was only postponed part of their revenues. Only 3 months was postponed for 2021.
Thank you, Alberto. And before I open the sections for questions and answers, I would like to hear of each of you what to look for going forward in the sport industry and esports. Start with Christopher, following Alberto, and then Juan Sebastián.
Sure, thanks, and everyone, thanks for sticking with us. I know Messi's Barcelona is playing Ronaldo's Juventus right now in the Champions League, and I'm sure some of you have got the TV on in the background, but only a couple more minutes because I'm going to go watch that myself. So in terms of things going forward, you know, from the lawyer's perspective, you know, we really need to counsel our clients in terms of, you know, expect that unexpected. And I think there's a couple ways of doing it. You know, one, building in more flexibility in your agreements. You know, things like, you know, an annual sit down to discuss modification of terms, of rights, of obligations and benefits to make sure that the relationship is working, or building in opt-out clauses to terminate without cause, or to move on. You know, having that flexibility involved in whether it's a sponsorship or an endorsement or a media contract, I think is very beneficial. I think another thing is sort of more performance-based agreements, you know, where both parties will benefit if there is, you know, sort of an upward swing in the performance. So lower guaranteed in terms of monetary value, but higher on bonuses, or bigger with respect to revenue share. I think we're going to see a lot more of that going forward. You know, with respect to media agreements, you know, the NFL or UEFA with the Champions League, they're going to get their flat fees, you know, no matter what. But I feel that in some of the more smaller leagues or up-and-coming leagues, or new platforms, you can certainly negotiate things like revenue shares in order to sort of spread both the risk and the reward around. And then with respect to, it's something we already mentioned a little bit, is, you know, obtaining and holding back some rights to content. You know, having that content is certainly a great tool to have in your arsenal when they're in downtimes like this and there may be no live sports to put on. You know, having the ability to show your brand, you know, your team, your league, whatever it may be. So making sure you're holding back some rights with respect to any media deals you do in order to maintain some of that content. And, you know, all of us want to watch it. I will go to Amazon and watch all the behind the scenes documentaries on sports all day long. And then if you already gave all those rights away to ESPN, then, you know, you're not going to be able to do that as a certain team. So maintaining some of those rights, I think, is also going to be something to look forward to going forward.
Alberto.
Yes, I think esports is something that we need to be, it's real, is now, but also for soccer here in Brazil is the future, right? I couldn't figure out why, because here in Brazil, esports, at least when football games for example, FIFA has one, and Christopher told, it's very famous. It's a fever here. Everybody plays, adults, kids, but I don't know why this license didn't turn. It's not an important revenue for the soccer clubs here in Brazil. It represents, I don't know, maybe $2,000 per year for Grêmio, which is nothing. But I think we need to figure out how to make more money in this industry. I think maybe we need also do other marketing measures along with, you know, we need to be more well-known in other countries, or with maybe higher world stars to be elected during, you know, for one of the kids in Argentina or Uruguay or even in Colombia or the United States, choose your team or your players. And you know, this is something very difficult nowadays, because the good players, they go to Europe, they go to Asia, they don't stay here much longer in our countries. But I think it's something that we need to focus and understand how we can make more business here, at least in Brazil, which is a huge market. We are talking about more than 200 million people who really love soccer. It's a religion here, and I can say not only for Grêmio, but the Brazilian soccer clubs, they don't make money with that. So we need to understand how to make a good business. And I'm here like represent institutions. From this perspective, I think for the future we need to turn those institutions more stronger in order to have to negotiate in other kind of patamar when something like this happen again. And how to do that is trying to find new opportunities. I think the pandemic, it was, and it happens like in the cycles. Sometimes it's like economic problems in your country. Sometimes is other thing. Now it's the pandemic issue, but we need to analyze our operations. We need to analyze the business as a whole, and to understand, to be more, not to expend a lot of money, everything. Just to give an example, we were, before the pandemic, we were 1-2 days to sign a very important contract to build a training center for kids, and it represents a lot of money for Grêmio, and now we are asking if it's worthwhile. I don't think so, because we have changed our minds with staying home and doing the things in different ways. So we need to reanalyze all of that. So sorry for the time, and thank you, Wallis.
Sebastian.
Okay, so maybe I have give some clues around what I think when it comes to esports and sports industry. What I think, an additional comment, even though they have to integrate themselves and try to, both ways, leverage themselves as an and as a branch in the entertainment industry, I think both have to learn from each other pretty much. I do think that, for example, Latin America, from my experience, esports has been pretty weak when it comes to legal terms or contract things. So, I'm not much aware, but it's not much protect. The players or the teams are not much more protected from this side. So what I think it's we should build infrastructure for generating even not only revenue sources, but some other synergies within both fields. For example, we do have I'm talking about Latin America. It is not a secret that we have some lack of infrastructure in some countries for sports and for esports as well. So maybe for putting you a little bit of context, the people in Asia, the gamers in Asia, the professional esports players are the best ones because they have the best. They started first, and they have better infrastructure, maybe connection. So it's pretty difficult for a pro player in Latin America to compete with a person in Asia. So that's what we see, for example, League of Legends championships, that 3 or 4 teams on the semifinals are Asian ones, right? So it's for a Latin American esports player or esports team, it's quite difficult right now to compete with some other regions. I think some other countries or regions such as Europe doesn't suffer that much about this, but I have seen a lot of governmental programs for esports development. The associations or the federations are rising. So I think this is pretty much the future in order to, I mean, what I wanted to say is to create infrastructure for not only the esports development, but for the sports and traditional sports to learn about it, and to get more conditions to get good opportunities for sponsorship or participation of this. So this is some kind of infrastructure that has to be developed together, like all the platforms, I think.
Thank you very much for the participation and for enlightening us with all these trending topic in the sports and e-sport industry and how the current situation is going. And now I'm opening the section for questions and answer. And we already have some couple of questions that I'm going to read for you to answer. This one is directed to Christopher. Christopher, do you think that these changes in scholarships or the amount that are available may be a deterrent in the future for young kids to go into some sports and damage in the future the quality of the sports we're seeing? Not because of a lack of talent, but an impossibility to follow those dreams.
Yeah, I think so. And it's actually a very big concern for the Olympics, frankly, because the athletes that go to the Olympics that represent Team USA are almost all college athletes in the United States. Subject to those few that are the professionals, but the rest of them for most of the sports are being trained by colleges. So if they don't have the scholarships to enter university to play that sport, we're certainly going to see, less quality, I think, going forward. And it will impact across the board. And I think you're going to see a lot of, the opportunities for a lot of students won't be there that they were in the past. And so I think it is, it's going to be a problem for, a few years. And it also has a lot to do with the fact that, American football and basketball are the biggest drivers of the revenue for college sports. And so if you're not in one of those two, it's tough. You're sort of, on the side, and you have to deal with it otherwise. And we're seeing that this year where there's lack of scholarship money. So yeah, I think it is going to be a problem. Not only in the development of future American athletes, but just giving the ability for people to go to school and to have that opportunity.
Thank you, Christopher. Another question that we have is related to the images that are transmitted in the events. You earlier mentioned that they were putting the images of players in the stadiums, in the games, and the people are in their houses. Could this pose a risk about them being retransmitted in this event?
Oh, sure, with sort of like the live fan cam kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's always those risks, and I think the leagues have done a good job of policing who appears, because I'm sure they can turn off the camera if necessary. But yeah, absolutely. You don't want inappropriate clothing being worn or people doing things in the background, or having images in the background that could be an issue. So I imagine that there is a bit of a delay before things are broadcast live, so they can shut that down if something happens. But yeah, it's certainly true. I mean, look at all of us, on the Zoom cameras. Who knows what appears in the background sometimes. We have to be really careful about it.
Yeah, that's right. Alberto, and I think this will be the last question that we have, because it's we're almost our section is unfortunately almost ending. In terms of contract agreements, you mentioned about the losses that you're facing when assigning new players. Can this be first viewing the future in a different perspective? How to handle the?
You mean when we sell the player, when we're hiring the player?
When they're selling the player to another.
Yes. Well, that's why I think we need to. My conclusion was to turn the institution stronger, because at the end we need to sell the player to close the accounts. Otherwise, we will arrive at the end of the year with a huge debt. So the perspective, the way of we would like to work is not depend on this money to survive. so we can keep the players more time here in our country before they go to another country. That's why, and look, 20 million euros is a huge of money. If we analyze the other Brazilian players who left the country, I think this is one of the biggest amount, but it could be much better if we have the power to maintain the player with us, and then the European and clubs will need more money to take the players from us.
Thank you. Thank you all for your participation, Christopher, Alberto, Juan Sebastian. Thank you for your time, and especially Juan Sebastian for you to joining us with a short notice. Our MVP player, as I mentioned earlier today. I think we leave with a lot of information related to the sports industry and the esports event, and how it has evolved from traditional to try to adapt to this current situation. And also as attorneys, I think we have now focused our practices in reviewing our agreements in a different perspective. And I think the force majeure clause, it's something that we used to leave for granted in the agreements, or we didn't review it, but we are for sure looking at it in a different perspective. So on behalf of ACP, I would like to thank you all for listening to us, for keeping here with us, knowing that there's a soccer game already playing, and to be part of our panel. So thank you very much, and have a great afternoon. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye bye.